Today's video is in collaboration with Books on My Bag for the Books on My Bag Readers Awards. Now these Readers Awards are completely new, which is why I'm very excited, and they asked me to talk to you about it, and in particular to talk about non-fiction. The shortlist has been announced, and the great thing about this award is that you, the reader, can vote for the books that you want to win. As always, all the links you need will be in the description of this video. Okay, non-fiction. First, I want to talk about my love of non-fiction and how I haven't really read it for what feels like years. When I was a little girl, I remember going to my local library and there was like a limit on how many non-fiction books you could take out, because obviously it was people maybe doing school projects or something like that. And so I think there was a regulation on fiction books. But I remember always struggling with the non-fiction because I loved history as a child. I was obsessed with history. I mean, I wanted to do my degree on that for a really long time. And I remember always coming up to my mum with this big pile of library books, and they'd all be non-fiction. And I'd always have to maybe put one back, and next week I'd always come back for it. And so as a child, I had this constant search for the new pieces of non-fiction that I wanted to read. And I've always had this really special place in my heart for non-fiction writing. But over the years, and I think in particular during my degree, I just kind of stopped having the time to read as much, because even though my degree was obviously literature, but obviously I read history and politics, and I did read non-fiction writing, and I would always go into the non-fiction sections of bookshops because I love the smart thinking section as well. It's a really new favourite at the moment. I'm a big fan of philosophical kind of writing, and Alain de Botton as well at the moment. Anyway, that's completely off my little subject. What was I saying? Don't know anymore. So yeah, I like non-fiction, but it has been a long time since I've really been able to read. So this was a great experience to see which non-fiction books people were really excited about, and the ones that are now up for the very first Readers Award. I'm going to start with Reasons to Stay Alive by Matt Haig. This book I see everywhere. Absolutely everywhere. I constantly see on social media being quoted or people taking pictures of the book, and every time I see it, it makes me so happy. So happy. And a tiny bit emotional, not gonna lie, because this book deals with mental health, and it is all about bringing mental health, taking that stigma away and talking about it openly, and it is incredibly moving and brutally honest. And myself, of having experience with mental health disorders, so relevant, and I can see myself in the pages of these books. It is completely life affirming, and what I have loved seeing is that it's on the bestseller list. So whenever I walk into the bookshop, there's always like a little section of loads of the books that are always on display. And for me, that means a lot, because it means that mental health is starting to be talked about openly, and that it's not something that is hidden and that we need to be ashamed of. So I'm actually starting with the book that I think will maybe win this section, this category. Now, I'm putting my bets out pretty early. The very first book. But all books are important. They all make an impact. But however cliched this sounds, I think this one saves lives. I think it has the potential to do that. I am grateful for this book. I'm grateful that it's there for people to read it when they need to read it. And for people who have never had any mental health problems, for them to go and listen. There's only so many ways I can say that this book is important, so go and read it. The next book is another one of my favourites, and it's Landmarks by Robert Macfarlane. I am a huge lover of the countryside and of open spaces and just kind of going outside in general and being with nature, communing with nature. So this is a book that interested me from the very start, and it's about how language and nature intersect. It's about how languages are created by the landscapes and the landscapes are created by language. I think if you're interested in the concept of nature writing, this is perfect. And any kind of writer, especially English writers who write about the English countryside. It is a field guide to literature I love, and it is a word hoard of the astonishing lexis for landscape. I thoroughly enjoyed this book, and as soon as I finished reading, I wanted to grab a novel and go out into an open field. What high praise! When Breath Becomes Air by Paul Kalanithi. Paul is a neurosurgeon who is diagnosed with terminal lung cancer, and it's about his journey of changing from a doctor to a patient. And I love that this is actually kind of shown in this cover itself. So you have the doctor, the neurosurgeon I should say, turning to the patient. I have only really just started reading this, and it is already lyrical. You know how it's going to end. It's a non-fiction book, it's fact. Already very emotional. I think I want to give it to my mum actually, make my mum read it, because my mum loves a book called Do No Harm, and Henry Marsh, the writer of that book, has actually done a really beautiful quote which I agree with, and the quote is, "Every doctor should read this book. It helps us understand and overcome the barriers we all erect between ourselves and our patients." And I think this book explores that really well, that the shift between turning from the doctor to the patient, but also what it means to be either, and just the complexity of human life, which, I mean, all books deal with, whether they are fiction or non-fiction, the variety of Paul as a man and the life that he lived, and it's sad to say the past tense. Another book that I feel is important, and again, a book very much about life and about the importance of living. This is another book by a doctor on a very different subject. This is It's All in Your Head by Suzanne O'Sullivan. It is about psychosomatic illness and the exploration of that. I'll read you a little bit of the blurb. "We accept our hearts can flutter with excitement and our brows can sweat with nerves. But on this journey into the real world of psychosomatic illness, Suzanne O'Sullivan finds the secrets we are all capable of keeping from ourselves." I've never looked into psychosomatic illness. I'm intrigued by, again, the complexity of the human brain, and the tricks we play on ourselves, and looking at it as an illness. I'm really intrigued, and I think this is what non-fiction should do. It's the point of non-fiction, it's the constant quest for knowledge, isn't it? Like, that's the meaning of life, really. But I never thought that a book like this would interest me. But ever since this arrived in my box from Books in My Bag, I have been desperate to read it. Now we have 2 history books. I'm going to start with, I always get this mixed up, SPQR by Mary Beard, and this is a history of ancient Rome. I know very little about ancient history, only really the little snippets I learned at kind of primary school and secondary school, which feels like quite a long time ago now. I am becoming increasingly interested in ancient Rome though, because of Jean from Bookish Thoughts. I think everybody becomes interested in the classics because of Jean. She is amazing and incredible. I've watched a couple of documentaries by Mary Beard and I found them fascinating, and I find them really approachable, and I can really get to terms with the history that she's talking about, and she makes it interesting for me. And because I think when I see a book like this, I am intimidated, and I think there is a feeling of slight intimidation with some non-fiction books. I hope that's not just me who feels that, especially with kind of big history books. But from reading little bits of this, it feels really easy to read in a way that I would feel very comfortable sitting down and reading this. The thing that I find really interesting about this book is that it's about the growth of Rome, not just the decline. When I think of kind of the Roman Empire, I do think of its decline, and I want to know where it all started. And her emphasis on humanity I find fascinating, because in my interest in history it was always very much social history and history of everyday people, and I'm intrigued. I want to know more. The Silk Roads by Peter Frankopan. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. With Mary Beard's book and Ancient Rome, I felt like at school we covered little bits of it. The history covered in the Silk Roads I have no knowledge of. It really reminded me of how Western my history classes at school were, and how we never really looked any further than Rome or Greece. My knowledge just has this massive gap because of that. I don't know about the Silk Routes. I don't know about the births and the decline of these empires. and I want to know more because I feel ashamed because my knowledge of history is such a tiny part on the map, and I can't be an adult and not know a wider history of our world. It actually says here a major reassessment of world history. That's what I want. I feel like our history, kind of that I think I've had access to as a child and as a kind of a young person, was very much a history of colonialisation, and a history that stuck to a very specific Western culture and a Western viewpoint. And I want to expand that, and I feel like this is the perfect place to start. And it also has a stunning cover. Overall, I think this shortlist is really, really exciting, and I can't wait to get to the books that I haven't read yet. Please let me know in the comments if you have any other non-fiction books that you've really enjoyed this year and haven't made it onto the shortlist. I'd like to know what they are. If you have any more specific recommendations for me, just talk to me in the comments about non-fiction. The voting for the Readers' Awards finishes on the 14th of November, so please vote, and the winner will be announced on the 24th.